Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 8 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council, where we are going to be discussing pavement conditions and goals. Mr. Hupy/Mr. Hutchinson, you have the com.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here for my presentation. Okay, is that up and running?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Looks good.
Okay, thanks. Good evening. I'm Nick Hutchinson, the city engineer. I also have with me here Marcus McNamara from OHM. They are the consultants that did our pavement analysis data collection this year and also helped us with some of the goal setting and some of the analysis. And he's here to help answer questions if need be. I wanted to start out with a little bit of background here. Our street system in Ann Arbor is approximately 300 miles of roads. And as you can see, the vast majority of that is paved in asphalt from that table there on the left. About 1/3 of our system is classified as major streets, and then about 2/3 or 200 miles of the system is the minor or local streets, and those are your neighborhood streets primarily. We're going to be talking a lot here about pavement condition and about the PACER rating system, so I wanted to get everybody on the same page so we're talking the same language. The PACER system is a pavement rating, condition rating system on a 1 to 10 scale, the 10 being the highest condition and 1 being the poorest. And the kind of industry standard groupings within that 10-point rating system are the good, fair, poor system that groupings that you see there on the screen, with 6 to 10 being good, 4 to 5 being fair, and 1 to 3 being poor. This system is consistent with that used by MDOT as well as most other local agencies within Michigan. And we did use a previous, we used to use a different rating system previously, but we switched over to PACER approximately 5 years ago, so that we could be consistent with the rest of the state as well. So, as elected officials, I'm sure you probably receive plenty of complaints and such about the condition of the roads. So, how do we improve our roads in town here? And the answer to that is pavement asset management. Previously, before we switched to this system, our strategies were focused on resurfacing and reconstruction. And being that those types of treatments focus on addressing the poor quality streets exclusively, it kind of got the nickname of the worst first strategy, which that seems to make sense, but why is that not the best way to go? The reason behind that is that in those resurfacing and reconstruction projects are easily the most expensive type of pavement treatments that you can use. And so that while we're spending a lot of money on those lowest quality streets, streets in the middle of the system, the ones that are in fair or good condition, are continuing to decline. So it's similar to use an analogy, it's similar to purchasing a car, driving it around, not doing any maintenance on it, waiting till the car dies and then buying another car. Not exactly the best way to get the most life out of your assets. So around 2014, we started a paradigm shift in how we treat our road system. And this focuses around using the right fix at the right time and expanding that mix of fixes. Instead of just using resurfacing and reconstruction as our only tools, we added other things, lower cost treatments where we could treat some of those streets in fair or good condition and maintain them so that they don't continue to slide down into the poor category. And those intermediate lower cost treatments are typically referred to as capital preventative maintenance type treatment. So in 2016, staff was just starting to dip our toes into the waters of pavement asset management. Still fairly new to us all. And so we started using the RoadSoft program, which is the program that we use to report our pavement condition results to the state and turn in our asset management plan and things like that. The program also has a component to it that does pavement asset management. So we started using that and started running some models with the data that we had at the time. And that is when we developed the goal that you've all seen before, for 80% of our streets to be a 7 or better by 2026. So looking at where we stand now, first of all, as of 2019, the last time that we did our pavement ratings, we had 35% of our major streets that were rated 7 and up, and we had 26% of our local streets rated 7 and up. The new data that just came in a few weeks ago shows 39% of our major streets in that category and 27% of our local streets. So the very small amount of good news here is that we are making progress, but the bad news is that we're not making nearly the progress that we had, much slower progress than we expected to be making. So going back to 2016, and again, we were really not familiar enough with the nuances of the software and had just started using it. For one thing, we were one of the first entities that I'm aware of that was actually started using this, this asset management component of the software. So there was not a lot of support out there. We did get some support for RoadSoft, but it was a learning curve, certainly. The other thing at that time is we did not really have a solid foundation of past data as well. As I mentioned, we had just shifted over to the PACER system before. We tried to convert some of the data from the previous system, but we really didn't have a solid foundation of information in the system to help predict the deterioration of streets. That was another challenge. I'd like to direct your attention to the graphic on the right side of the screen here, the SMART system of goal setting. And that basically talks about that your goals should be specific, measurable, aggressive, realistic, and time-bound. Now, the goal that we set is all of those things, certainly. Where the problem seems to come in is our A is substantially outpacing our R. The goal that we set was very, very aggressive, but at the cost of being realistic. So looking to kind of benchmark ourselves to some degree against what other communities are doing, we've asked for some assistance from OHM Advisors. Again, they're the company that was doing our pavement ratings this year. They have lots of experience working with many other municipalities around the state and doing pavement asset management plans and working in the RoadSoft software. So we're looking to leverage a little bit of their expertise to help us out with the analysis of goal setting. I also want to mention here the Transportation Asset Management Council, or TMAC. They're an entity at the state level that was created by state law some years ago for the purposes of promoting transportation asset management throughout communities in Michigan. And one of the things that they also espouse is that, you know, the goals that local municipalities set should be realistic. Now, they've been focusing most of their efforts in the recent years on just working with local municipalities to get them to actually do pavement asset management plans and get them turned in. They do have the authority, I believe, under state law to impose penalties too, either for not turning in an asset management plan or potentially for not meeting the goals that are set. Now, they haven't done that last part yet. I don't think they've done either of them yet, but the possibility does exist in the future. Whether they exercise it or not, I don't know. But another reason to make sure that the goals we have set are realistic. So this leads us to looking at proposing new goals for our pavement system. Still looking at that 2026 timeframe that we originally set up. We kind of set about look to what is, with more knowledge now, what do we feel is realistic within that timeframe? And so starting out with that, we wanted to look first of all at the PACER rating that is kind of our target. We had set the target previously at 7, but looking at those groupings that you might remember from the earlier slide, 6 to 10 is the good category. So we're proposing looking at more of a 6 instead of a 7. And to give you an idea of a 6, the picture on the right, not sure what street that is offhand, but that is a 6 in the PACER rating. As you can see, it's a good street. It's in good condition. Drivers, bicyclists using that street really aren't going to have any complaints about it. So looking at what goals we think would be realistic with that criteria in mind, we're looking at trying to, by 2026, again, trying to achieve 60% of our major roads in that category and 45% of our local roads. You can see the percentages on the right there where we stand currently. And that also points out a discrepancy we have there between our major street system and our local street system. Clearly our major roads, we're doing a little bit better on our major roads than we are on our local roads. So there may need to be some redistribution of resources there to help move the local roads in the right direction. Again, that is 2/3 of our system, so a little bit harder to move the needle there. And past practices have, for a while, had been more focused on getting the major roads up to speed, because I believe in the past this was kind of flip-flop the other way. And then in addition to that, we felt like a second goal was really necessary as well. One, to address the streets that are at the bottom end of the condition scale in that poor category. You could see potentially a situation where you have a lot of streets that are really good and a lot of streets are really poor, and that's not going to be acceptable to anyone, certainly. So we wanted to make sure we set a criteria here for a maximum percentage of streets down in that poor category, so that we're still addressing those streets at the bottom, which is where really all of the complaints come from, mostly in the 1 and 2 category. You'll see that I have question marks in there, and that's because we have not yet had time, being that this data is very fresh, to do the analysis that we need to do to come up with what we feel would be reasonable percentages in there. So that would still be forthcoming. So the rationale for these new goals, just to partially recap here, it does set an average for the entire system, but also has a second goal as well to address those streets in the worst condition. Benchmarking versus other communities, using OHM's range of expertise and experience with some of their other clients that have similar sized road networks. The goals that we're proposing here are in line with other communities of similar systems, but are still a little bit more aggressive. And as I mentioned, they're aggressive, but we do believe they're achievable based on the modeling that we've done so far. And then also we believe that these will be more aligned with resident expectations. And what I mean by that is not that everyone wouldn't certainly like all of our streets to be in excellent condition, certainly, but you know, having all of our streets an 8 or above, for example, is probably never realistic. But being more aligned with the residents' expectations, what I mean by that is the difference between a 6 and a 7 is really almost undiscernible to the untrained eye. And then really where all the complaints come from are down at in the 1s and the 2s PACER category. And that's why the second goal, to address those. So next steps, we need to perform some additional modeling with these new goals in mind, and use that additional modeling to continue to refine our pavement maintenance strategy. As I mentioned, some resource shifting might need to happen between major streets and local streets to try to achieve all of these goals. And then coming up in 2023 and then again in 2025 is our next round of pavement condition analysis, so we can continue to build our knowledge base and see how we're advancing towards those goals. We'll probably also add one in 2026, being that that's the horizon year for our current goals. And then finally, I also want to mention, I think this is very important here, that we do want to do some additional analysis on different goals and see what level of additional investment may be needed if we wanted to set higher goals than what we're proposing here. This pavement asset management strategy that we're following is sound. It's got lots of backing from a lot of research, and it's certainly the way to go. What I presented here this evening in terms of goals is what we now believe is realistic in that time frame based on the level of investment that we currently have, the funding that we currently have. If we want to set higher goals than what we have right now, then additional investment will be needed. And that's why we want to run some more modeling scenarios to see in different sets of goals what additional investments would be needed. And then in the longer term, presuming that we can meet these goals in 2026, we can always do a reevaluation of those goals and keep upping those goals and kind of taking them up to the next level as we move forward in the long haul. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the challenges that we face in achieving some of these goals. First of all, construction costs have been increasing higher than inflation for some years now. So trying to predict what costs are going to be in the future is always very challenging. Contractor capacity has also been a challenge and will continue probably for a while to be a challenge. We often don't have a ton of bidders on some of these road projects, and so we're somewhat limited by the capacity of these of the companies that do our work. We have heard from some contractors, recently that they would run other crews if they can find qualified people, but apparently there's an issue with that. Kind of related to that, COVID has been a challenge as well. Hopefully that's one that we won't have to be dealing with for too much longer. But the material shortages and supply chain issues have certainly touched the construction industry to some degree as well, and staffing shortages related to it as well. Our capital preventative maintenance program that we run every year did not get nearly as much work done in the latter half of this year as we had anticipated, because we ran into issues with the crews. They were short-staffed. They had some crews that were completely shut down because of needing to quarantine. So that was certainly a challenge, and that certainly didn't help our numbers this year any. We expect that they'll catch up with that work in the spring, but the challenge has still been there over the past 2 construction seasons. And then finally, there's always the pressure that's out there to focus and spend more and more of our resources on just those lower end streets. But we need to be cautious about giving into that temptation to do that, because that would bring us back to that worst first philosophy that really we were operating in earlier in the century, that kind of got us into the situation that we are in now with the condition of our roads. All right, that is the end of my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. I have a few questions. You gave us an example of a road, like a picture of a road rated 6. I was curious if you had an example, maybe you could point to something that is a 3.
Gee, off the top of my head, I don't have that detailed information right on the top of my head there. But if I see if I can share my screen again.
In the slide proposed goals, there was a road that looked kind of rough.
Yeah, this one right here, I think that's Kingsley, and that might be a 2 actually.
Okay.
That's I believe that's either a 1 or a 2, but I can't say that for sure.
Okay.
So I can provide pictures that go along with every rating, you know, potentially just for your information. That would not be difficult to do.
Okay. My other question is, you mentioned that OHM is benchmarking us with other communities that are customers. I'm curious if you, off the top of your head, know any of those other communities that are a similar size to us that they're benchmarking us against?
Marcus, you want to jump in and handle that one for me?
Sure. Everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Glad to be here tonight. Thank you for having me. As Nick mentioned, we do PASER for a number of communities, but the ones that we looked at specifically compared to this city of Ann Arbor were City of Troy, City of Farmington Hills, and City of Livonia.
Were we a comparison just strictly based on size, or are there roads in the similar condition to ours?
Yeah, those were selected more just based on the mileage of streets that they maintain was similar. On the conditions, even between those 3 communities are all very different. The ratio streets, good, fair, and poor condition between majors and locals is different for all those communities. So that's information that we can get out to you, but there isn't one right answer. And we say benchmarking. I think it's important to see what other communities are doing and utilize that information to help with your decision making. But it's certainly not a 1-for-1 comparison or anything to the effect of, you know, this community set these goals, so these are what we should have. It's just a good for comparison's sake. And again, it was selected mainly based on the miles of roads that were in their jurisdiction.
I mean, I guess I would be curious to know how I appreciate that they're not exactly the same. It's not apples to apples, but I would be curious to know the condition of their roads, major to local, compared to ours, because I know that there's been a lot of conversation about how funding for these roads is primarily coming from the state. And if they're comparable size, I would be curious how we're comparing against them. The other question I had, and it's really specific and in the weeds, but I'm curious if there's an update on what's going on with Scioto Church.
Yeah, I can provide a real quick update on that. We ran into some problems with the plan approval and various other of the administrative things that have to happen to bid a project through MDOT, being that it's a federal aid project, it has to be bid through MDOT. That is currently in the system for getting out to bid right now, and we will be starting the work on that first thing in the spring.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Radina.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions as well, and I think mine relate back. I started digging into this a little bit during our last budgeting cycle, and I asked then at the time whether or not the funding we were providing was going to be adequate to get us to our 2026 goals at the time, and that was the first time that I heard that those goals probably needed to be recalibrated a little bit, and that we weren't going to reach those goals. I will admit, and this is not a commentary on staff, because it is a commentary, I guess, on the resources available, but I'm a little underwhelmed with perhaps the adjusted goals. And so I guess I'm wondering what are the primary things that are driving our expectations around why that is realistic? Is the primary factor, funding? Is it, I heard during the challenges section, some of the contractor issues and staffing. What are the things that would be necessary if we wanted to hit a higher target in order to get us there? I guess I'm trying to figure out what it is council could potentially do to make sure if this were a top priority of ours, what we would be doing to get us closer to those original targets.
Yeah, so funding is the primary thing. As we're looking at setting these goals, We're looking at, here is the amount of funding that we have available from various sources. And then we try to optimize what we can do with that funding, given that dollar figure. So funding is the primary thing. Yes, there's those other challenges such as contractor capacity and things like that, but there isn't a whole lot that we can do about those. We can hope that the economic environment improves in such a way that contractors can find the employees that they need and they can get the work done that they need. But in terms of things that we control, funding is the primary thing.
Okay, and then I guess maybe as a follow-up to that, and not yet sure on how federal infrastructure package might impact us and other potential sources, but also as as we start thinking about budgeting for the next year and things like that, I guess I wonder if I don't expect you to have these tonight, but if you can maybe provide a little bit more details on like what it would require funding wise over the next few years to hit these adjusted goals, but also potentially what you would project we would need in order to hit those original targets, because I would be interested in seeing what that difference is, so that we have a better understanding resources wise what this means and the decisions that we're making. And then I guess my second question comes more to kind of the public aspect and the transparency aspect on it. I was really excited back in January, I think, when we rolled out the sidewalk gap prioritization and progress dashboard. And I guess I'm wondering if there has been any consideration and whether or not it would be possible for us to do something similar for roads in the community. I know that I get a number of questions from constituents about when certain roads are on the schedule, whether or not the city's even aware that there are major repairs that are needed. And so I wonder if there's any type of public facing dashboard that's in the works, or if that's something that could be developed.
There's nothing existing for that right now. Such a dashboard, I think, would be primarily a reflection of the capital improvement plan. So that's something that probably multiple departments will need to discuss, about in terms of the feasibility of that.
Okay, thanks. I think that's all I've got for right now. I might come back.
Councilmember Amlai.
Thank you, and thanks to staff for providing us this information and the consultant on the call. I'm not going to be as subtle as my colleague was, perhaps, but I'm just woefully disappointed with this, to be honestly, with everybody. It's just. I think we need to address this in a way that maintains a little bit closer to the goals that were set in 19 and 16. That's just a little bit of a commentary, but I do have questions. There were some challenges listed as to why we can't meet our goals. I also want to know if there are any recent policy adoptions by council since 2019 and 2016, let's say, that have also slowed down our ability to achieve these goals. Those policy adoptions since 2016 that have perhaps affected our ability to meet those goals. Are those available, or can we have those sent to us if they're not?
I don't know that I would have an immediate answer for that. It would probably take a little bit more thinking and review to come up with anything. I'm not thinking of anything substantial off the top of my head, but like I said, it would probably take a bit more thought.
And I can send that in as an email question as to what policy adoptions have again slowed down the pace. There was the benefits of the capital preventative maintenance. Much of that was done in 17 or I think 19, I apologize. When do we begin to see the benefits of doing those capital preventative maintenance? When do we start to see the benefits of that? It was suggested that would kind of lengthen the lifespan of these roads. And unfortunately, the bad news for our constituents and our community is we're not making the progress that we set out. And, and again, when do we see those benefits from the CPM?
Well, the benefits are seen immediately after doing that. The CPM actually doesn't just hold a street at its current spot, but it does bump it up a couple of levels typically. So from that perspective, the benefits are there already. I mean, we're treating in many cases, sometimes 4s, 5s, 6s is typically where those applications are seen, and they'll bump them up to maybe a 7 or an 8, for example. I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but where the real benefit comes in on those is that we're keeping them from dropping down into the poor category.
And could you describe to us what treatments those are on the
Sure.
the light, the type of light maintenance?
Yeah, they're typically like a slurry seal or a cape seal. We've been doing a lot of, I think primarily the cape seals, where it's a layer of emulsion, a chip seal on top of it, which is something you commonly see like out in rural roads in the county. But then being that we're in an urban environment, we put another layer down on top of it to seal that in so that you don't see or get any of the chips being thrown up by wheels and things like that. So those are the primary treatments that we've been doing over the years. They're quick. We tend to be in and out fairly quickly on those. And they're lower cost, so we can treat more miles.
I will ask, as my colleague also asked, about additional state and federal funding and what that can do in trying to maintain our original goals that were set, because it's just as the governor had campaigned on, fix these damn roads, and yet we're falling short on that. And so trying to, rather than adjust the fence posts, kind of dig deeper in ways that we can address this infrastructure issue that we have, which we are reminded constantly about. And when we leave the area, we find out many other communities in the country and in the state ride on better roads. And we're a generous community here. And frankly, I think our constituents deserve more. So on the state and federal funding, when will that come into focus and to give us a better idea of how we can get back to where we need to be?
Yeah, I don't know when that'll come into focus. I don't know when the numbers will come down to us and how we'll be able to utilize that funding. Any additional funding certainly helps, but I don't have the answers right now in terms of what we're going to see. Craig, have you heard anything?
No, other than the bills were passed at the federal level. We do have some projects, and on the transportation side, Nick, I don't know if you have projects on the top of your head that we have sort of prepped for potential transportation funding.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of projects that are kind of shovel ready, I guess. We tend to not design our projects until we have funding secured for them. So, but when that funding becomes available, we'll move as nimbly as we can to take advantage of it. We will take advantage of any of it that comes our way.
I know you would, and I appreciate the expertise and the dedication and the work that we have. I'm just trying to deliver more for our constituents who repeatedly bring up these issues, and trying to find the funding to apply to this, and getting a number associated to get back to our original goals. It would be helpful for council, myself, to have that additional information if at all possible.
Yeah, and we plan to do that.
Councilmember Dish.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I know this can't be easy for you. The data is quite helpful because it paints a very clear picture that the roads, in some ways, the roads that really hit our residents the hardest, which are the local roads, are in the worst shape and very little has changed. And so I think some of the frustration that they feel is due to that. And you have given us a way, and I hope the city, of course, well, you all know more about messaging than I do, but you've given us a way to call attention to the fact that there have been improvements in our major roads. And I think that that's really helpful. But I think if we're super honest about the fact that there's been very little progress with the local roads and we're a lot farther from our goals there, so we understand their frustration and we understand the need to move forward more quickly on that, that might be helpful. I'm delighted that you said that picture was Kingsley because I was speaking with some constituents last Wednesday evening and they flagged Kingsley as a terrible road. And now I will write to them and say, you know what, you were right. So that is helpful. We are not, they don't like it when we invalidate their experience, and sometimes their experience is parochial, and so that happens, but other times they are so right on. So I do want to affirm that. So what I was wondering is if there's any way that we could help. Councilmember Radina has made a great suggestion about the possibility of a dashboard. The other thing that might help is if we could possibly share the PACER ratings with them so that they know how to put the streets that are near them into context. And it will at least be of some comfort to them if they know, yeah, this is really a bad street and it should be coming up sooner. Whereas others of them, sometimes because they don't have a sense of perspective, they feel like, well, this street needs to be redone. And I feel like saying, oh, please drive up Breedy Place and tell me your street is bad because that looks like a dinosaur took bites out of it, you know? And so I think if we could share those PACER ratings, we give them a perspective on the whole, and maybe that isn't as complicated as what you were describing with a dashboard. So that was just one thing I wanted to just put out there. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, has there been declining state and federal funding that has slowed our progress?
I don't know that it's been declining. I know at a federal level, the surface transportation program, federal funds that we use on an annual basis have been relatively consistent. Act 51 has been, I think, mostly flat, if I recall correctly, which, you know, in the age of construction prices rising faster than inflation might as well be a decline.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's something that we can say.
Councilmember Griswold.
I want to thank staff. This was an excellent report, concise, well organized. As far as our roads, I feel like we have the roads that this council deserves because this is the funding level that we provided and it's clearly inadequate. I also believe that we need a paradigm shift. We frequently talk about roads versus pedestrian and non-motorized infrastructure, but actually pedestrians and cyclists are more adversely impacted by poor road conditions. Potholes in bike lanes, in crosswalks, end up with trip hazards. I know so many people that have broken wrists because they hit a pothole and were thrown off their bike. So we need to realize that this is not just for vehicles, this is for all users. And we need to look at crosswalk conditions and bike lane conditions. Another thing is the cost of repair, not only the cost for bikes, the cost for medical treatment, but also the cost for vehicle repairs is quite high. Another thing, we need to manage user expectations. And I think we're really being naive if we think that this is acceptable for our customers. And it isn't. And I promised that I would mention Lendelock Road as an example of a road in very bad condition. So I guess in closing, I'd like to say, and we don't need an answer right now, what do we need in order to have good roads as defined by our customers? So rather than starting with the money we have and make excuses, I think we should start with, and not staff, I'm not blaming staff at all, it's council's responsibility to set the budget, determine what we need, and set priorities, because I don't want to have people tripping in crosswalks and cyclists with broken wrists because we have potholes in our streets. Thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I want to make sure I have this right. I'm just going to run some numbers that I was running when I looked at this. So I had in my head that a good road was 7 and up, but using the numbers that we have here as a 6 or higher, and I agree when you look at that photograph and, you know, I mean, let's just call it 6 so we can feel better. So if I have this correct, we have about 100 miles of major roads and about 200 miles of local roads approximately. And a fifth of those, or about 22 miles of major roads, are in poor condition, and 2/5 of the local roads, are about 78 miles, are in poor condition. And so, you know, you might say, when you look at that, that's, you know, 100 miles, that's a third of our streets generally are in poor condition. And so I'm interested in what we think the cost to bring them from poor to, you know, of course, I would love to see the cost to bring that third of our streets that are in poor condition to 0. But I have a sense 100 miles of streets, it's going to be kind of expensive. But you said that we're going ahead and we're doing this work in the 4 to 5 category, where to keep it from slipping down to a 3, which I think is perfectly appropriate. But so when I run the numbers on that, you know, it's about 45% of all our roads are 4 or 5. So if I'm reading this correctly, 78% of our roads are poor or don't want to be poor, and there are 4 or 5, and only a third of our total roads is decent. And, you know, that's a huge amount. And so I think about trends when I think about spending priorities. And, you know, I guess I'd want to go back and look at the budget and see what the trend was on spending. And it has been asked of me is, you know, as a percentage of historical spending, have we increased spending on certain aspects of our roadways while we've decreased spending on, since 2014, on road repair, or this trying to keep the 4 and 5 from being a 3? Is there a way to tease out what the trend has been on that? Like, have we increase the amount of non-motorized transportation spending while we've decreased the amount of road repair funding, as an example? I know that's not part of this, but I find I get a lot of information from trend analysis that I don't get from just looking at the numbers. And Nick, I know I didn't have you put these together, but does that sound right, that about a third of our streets are 3 or below? Totally. And these are center line miles, right? When we say 300, yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to follow all the math that quickly right there. I mean, we do have, we have more detailed breakdowns of what percentage is in each category than I have in this presentation. I just don't have it sitting right in front of me here.
Yeah, so like if we did 0 to 5 and then 6 and above, I'm wondering what that number would be, because
we have
4s and 5s you're working on, right? Those are the ones you're trying to keep from getting worse, with the Cape Seal and the patching and the interim patching, like Pontiac Trail got, whatever you call that, the cut and patch. What's that called?
I built that. Well, what happened on Pontiac Trail? I think we did the patching in advance of a Cape Seal. Okay. And that was what I think that was one of the places that our contractor didn't get to this summer because of their staffing issues that will probably be addressed in the fall.
When constituents ask me a question about a specific road project, it comes across your desk in such a way that I could say, like when people said, hey, what did they do to the surface of the Broadway Bridge? We did the repair and the painting, the masonry repair on the sides and the rails and all that. And like, is it easy for me to RFI that as a question to you, and you can send me the cost and the description of that individual project, more or less?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot, because we get individual questions. So thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Thanks again for the good presentation. So I wanted to just make sure I understand kind of how council or how staff is beginning to rethink how the goals are being set. So you talked about the paradigm shift of moving away from the worst first, but it sounds like there's a little bit of a tweaking to how we're approaching things now, so that it's going to be, you mentioned, setting an average, but also seeking to fix the worst roads. And so I wondered, could you share a little bit more about how that's not going back to where we started from, or how that's different?
Yeah, it's a balancing act is really what it is. When I say we want to spend, we have been spending more of our funding on those capital preventative maintenance projects in those middle areas, that doesn't mean we're spending all of our funding on there as well. I mean, we still have to spend, we still need to spend on the streets that are in that poor category, which we do through, various capital projects, our street resurfacing program and whatnot. So we're still spending on those. So really what we're looking at here is trying to balance it so that we're doing both. That we're spending the right amount of money that we need to be spending on those middle roads to keep them from falling. And while we're doing that, lifting up the ones that are down at the bottom. When we treat a road that's in, a poor condition, really the only option when they're down at a 1, 2, or 3 is to do a resurfacing or a reconstruction. And that will reset them all the way back up to like a 9 or a 10. So it's really about balancing what we spend on the middle and the bottom.
Okay. And I've got a few questions. So, a number of folks have alluded to how do we do more? How do we, and you've said it's really about funding. But I guess I'd like you to be more explicit about, it's always about a matter of what our priorities are, what the trade-offs are, to spend more on and to accelerate this. What would we have to not do?
If we're talking about within the current available funding right now, that is an excellent question, and that kind of is the question. If we are going to do more with the funding we have available right now, what would we not do? Because there is inevitably something that we would not do. I don't know the answer to that. That's probably that's really a policy level question. But there would have to be something that we would not do.
Okay.
And I don't have an answer for you as to what that is right at the moment.
Okay. In terms of, so the benchmarking cities, the Livonia, Farmington Hills, and what was the third one?
Marcus?
City of Troy.
Troy. Okay. I think, what I've heard underneath some of my other colleagues' questions is, is the fact that we are a community that's invested in developing a multimodal transportation system and advancing those goals. Is that, impacting our ability to, have essentially higher quality of roads in a more conventional sense. And so as we're doing that benchmarking, I do think it's important for us to understand how much those other communities think, how much they're investing in concepts of complete streets, and what types of goals they have. Obviously, we've set a pretty ambitious goals for ourselves of reducing for our carbon neutrality plan of reducing car trips by 50% by 2030. And that means building out a system that we've neglected for many, many years too. And so that, obviously that comes at a cost for our community of what our priorities are. I don't know how much this is being thought of or considered, or how much we can plan for the future in this sense. But I assume that, the factors that degrade road quality are things like weather and weight of vehicles and traffic volumes and things like that. Obviously, if we're successful at moving towards our goals of reducing car trips by 50% by 2030, or getting closer to that. Do we have a sense of what kind of impact that might have on our roads? Specifically, I'm thinking of, we are doing things like doing more road diets. And so I assume that the edges of our roads are not having the same sort of traffic that they used to, and they may be degrading at different levels. And yet we might, as Councilmember Griswold said, really want to make sure that those sections that have really vulnerable users are maintained. Do you have any sense as staff beginning to think about how that changes our funding needs?
Yeah, I'm not really sure at the moment. I mean, that's probably something that would beg kind of a larger study and analysis. I'd probably want to look towards seeing if there's any research that's already out there that speaks to that. In most cases, I think when you're looking at future traffic patterns, I think traditionally you're looking at, volumes, vehicle volumes increasing. I mean, that's probably the typical analysis. So I don't know that there's anything out there that would speak to decreasing volumes and the impacts on the roads. It would have to be something we would need to look into.
Okay, thanks. And then finally, obviously, if we get, federal infrastructure package and more funding there, we're going to be competing with many other jurisdictions around us who are also receiving this funding and want to invest in the same types of projects that we are. And you've already talked about sort of the capacity issues that we're having in terms of being able to find folks to be able to do the work that we want. Is there any plan? Are we concerned about that in terms of being able to find, even if we have more funding, being able to find the folks to do it? And then secondly, are we working, even regionally to try to solve this capacity issue, like trying to encourage apprenticeship programs, or is there something that we could be doing to help solve that problem in any way?
I'm sorry, I missed your first question. Could you repeat it?
Sure. Sorry. I'm wondering, hopefully we'll have more money through the infrastructure package, and yet many other communities will have that same money too. And they're going to be competing, they're going to be putting out proposals for more work in their communities. We're already seeing a capacity issue of being able to get folks to do the work that we want to do. I assume that's going to be strained even more in the future, even if there's more funding.
Okay.
Are we thinking about the future, about how we might be able to solve that problem in our region? Are there steps that we could be taking?
I've thought about it a lot. I'm not sure that I have an answer. So yeah, I can't really say. I think it might be something to talk to some of the trade organizations perhaps and find out what they have to say about it. That may be something that they've put a lot more, thought into, and maybe have a kind of a wider base of experience and might be able to answer those questions better than I could from my, view of mostly Ann Arbor. And I'm sorry, now that I got your first question, I've forgotten your second one.
Well, I think that's fine. They were all tied together in terms of thinking about apprenticeship programs, or something that we might be able to be doing as a municipality or doing regionally to try to strengthen that group there. I just thought maybe that there were, when you're at conferences, maybe you're hearing about some innovative programs that are happening, in other spots, things we might be able to foster here, or, working with our educational institutions.
I'll keep my ear to the ground, and if I hear about them, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Song.
Thank you for all this. I've been following what our governor's been trying to do in advocating for funding. Last year, she proposed a $3.5 billion road bonding plan. And given that we have Republican control, that really hasn't gone far. So despite our best local efforts, we still are within the state of Michigan. So what I'm wondering is perhaps maybe we can do a little bit more on the policy committee and tracking what's going on in Lansing and understanding how soon or what's happening there, and in that way we can help get that message across to our own representatives, to Lansing, and making sure that Ann Arbor is considered. So I'll just take that on as homework for the policy committee as a, and then I guess my ask of folks is there a way that we can take a look, compare our response and our road conditions to cities with a comparable commuter population? So if we're having 80,000 folks coming in and out of the city a day, is there another city with similar circumstances?
Go ahead. Looks like you have something to say there,
Yeah.
Marcus. Go ahead.
Yeah, I could, and I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I can tell you that Troy has a significant daytime population differential between the resident population and daytime. So that would be one, I think, and we can look at those figures and see how they actually compare more accurately. But that one is one that was already included that things are there. And we can look, those are communities that I just happen to, that were good, I think, comparisons that I have happened to have experience with personally. The other nice thing now is the transportation asset management plans that Nick had mentioned that earlier that are due to the state. The state rolled those out. Every road agency that has over 100 miles of road is required to submit that, and they did it over a 3-year cycle. So 2/3 of those agencies are past their due date, and the third group is this year, by the end of this year. So there is more information out there for benchmarking and comparing that we can gather up for you, certainly.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I understand we can look at cities of similar sizes, but for us being the economic seat of the county with this pretty high volume of daytime commuters is, I think that kind of puts us in a different category. Great, thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thanks. So, obviously there's a lot in this, just 11 pages. So I appreciate it. I'm just trying to tease stuff out from it. So when we talk about the average rating, a system-wide average rating, 5.08. So on the average, you'd say our roads are not good. And this is for 2014 till now, right? 2014 to 2021.
Yeah,
that's average of through this PACER study only.
That's the average condition based on the pavement ratings that we just got in.
Okay. And so, so that, like that chart on page 4 where it talks about lane miles of road treated by treatment type, we see the big bump in the lane miles in 17 and 18 because of the light. And then in 18, obviously real heavy capital preventive maintenance. Looks like reconstruction's fairly uniform because those are long-term jobs that have water main and all that tied to it, I imagine. So that has to be somewhat consistent across the years. I guess one of the trend things I was looking for, we look at how many more miles we treated in 17 and 18, and then I can see 19 because we had trouble getting labor and stuff. 20 kind of up again. It was the amount of money that we spent on the roads similar, and we got more out of that, more lane miles out of the same amount of money in 17 and 18.
Yeah, so what you see on there that's the difference is that purple part of the bar. That's the light CPM treatments, and that's primarily, actually, I think it's all crack sealing. And that's done at a pretty high level. That's usually done on the 7s in that area. And the purpose of that is to seal up the cracks in the pavement, keep water from getting in there, and slow the deterioration of the road. A very important treatment in the grand scheme of things. Generally, you can do a lot of crack sealing for a small amount of money, and that's why there's a spike in those years. We don't do it every year. We wait until we have kind of a critical mass of streets that qualify for that treatment. I think we've got another one coming up next year, so you'll see another big spike there. So yeah, that's primarily why those big spikes in those years.
I was out there when those. I really feel for these field guys out there, and I was out there one day and they ran out and they weren't even halfway up the street, and the guy said, "I think these cracks are bigger than they thought," And I know that they had to go back and find more. So I appreciate you explaining why that had jumped up so and what that meant. So thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Amlai.
Thank you. Appreciate all the questions that are being brought forward. Is there any statistical information on the safety of the streets that are rated in poor condition? Do we have any statistical data that we can get to quantify the safety of these roads for all users? So we have a better idea of the safety and welfare of our constituents, and rather than just it being a much nicer experience, or whether there's a correlation in safety and accidents and such.
We haven't done that kind of analysis before. I envision that it could be doable if we ran kind of a comparison of crash data versus pavement condition. I don't think that would be too difficult to do, but I would have to look into what kind of effort that would take to produce that.
All right, I may send that in as well as a question, just to get a better understanding of the gravity of the situation versus the luxury or so of having a smoother ride. Thanks.
Councilmember Griswold.
Yes, I want to address that last question. And I think that the condition of the roads versus the safety, it would be better to look at research that was done either at the state level or by SEMCOG or maybe the Federal Highway Administration. They have information about how much safer a roadway is with sidewalks. And so they may have that information. And so I can take that as an action item to try to find out from SEMCOG what might be available. Because that gets back to what I was talking about. What's the cost of not having roads that are in good condition? What are the trade-offs? So I'll do that.
Yeah, we could certainly look at our own system, but that's a good point that SEMCOG or other, or maybe MDOT might have potentially have data on that too. We can look into that.
Councilmember Grant.
Thanks. I'd just like to reiterate some things that my colleagues have said about making some of this data more accessible to the public. There's really no reason not to have, interactive maps that show like what your rating is of your road and where you are, because this was really hard for me to watch. I was somewhat of an evangelist of the switch to doing this with the hopes that we'd be doing excellent preventative maintenance, but also that if your road did get to the point where it was one of the worst, that it was kind of around the corner when you'd be getting a much nicer road that was better for all users. So I think it's important for us as council members to I don't want to use, go as far to say like that I was not being truthful to constituents, because I really was under this, this old plan, but people would say, well, this road is so bad. Well, because you were just one of the unlucky ones that had to get so bad before we're going to redo the whole thing. And the others are getting preventative maintenance. So I do think if we're going to be looking at these trade-offs and trying to make decisions, and our local roads aren't, we know, in terrible shape. Having some data to explain to people where they are, in the queue, because I think it does put us in the position of saying, it's probably not that far off, and maybe it is. And I'd rather be honest. I guess honest is the wrong word, but I'd rather have more complete information that I could share with constituents, and that they can access themselves, because I think we have much better systems than we used to in terms of mapping. Like if we can do it for the Greenbelt, we can do it for our roads, right? So.
Yeah, we can. We'll have to discuss that a little bit more among staff, but The Pacer data does go into our GIS, so I imagine it would not be difficult to come up with an interactive dashboard for that.
I just, even if you can't, I understand the hesitancy in the past to say, you know, we're only going to go X number of years out. And I don't necessarily think we should be making promises like this year, this year, this year, this is where you are in the queue, but to at least be able to know where you stand, and to help us make better decisions as these federal dollars hopefully come in, about how we can be improving our all of our roads, but these local streets.
Any further questions? Councilmember Hayner.
I would just ask if our administrator, our new acting administrator, has any comment on the state of our roads, or a plan, you know, what we should do in our next budget cycle to continue to support fixing our not good roads. I don't want to put you on the spot, sir, but I just wondered if you had any insights.
Well, certainly, Councilman, in driving around the city, and I don't have the technical background of the staff, but clearly to the naked eye, we have a road issue. What I'm trying to do and working with our CFO, I want to get a better understanding of how we use our money. So as the budget is being developed, I'm not saying we aren't, because I've not been here long enough to get really into the weeds, but I want to look and see how we are leveraging the dollars that we are investing. And I've asked a couple of questions about, are we using cash as cash, or are we using it as debt service to leverage other dollars? And so I need to get a better understanding of that. And then to one of the earlier questions that was raised, we are taking a review now of what projects we may have to qualify for the federal dollars coming out of the infrastructure decision that Congress just made. I've got to look at, you know, what the formulas are going to be and how they're going to be allocated across the country. But from past experience, when an initiative that had as much trouble getting across the finish line as this one did, whoever the president is interested in seeing early wins, things that are ready to go, things that you can put money in to get things off the ground. And so what I had asked the staff a few days ago was to identify for me things that we have that are close to being ready to go, should we have dollars to make it happen. I don't know that it will address all of the street issues that we have, but in terms of being strategic, we should want to seize early dollars from infrastructure if we're in a position to. And so I do intend to speak with our state lobbyists to see about that, and also huddling with the staff and some of my own contacts in DC about just what's going to happen there.
Councilmember Omwami.
Thank you again. Couple questions. Is this presentation a formal, I mean, it hasn't been adopted by council, it's been presented to council. Are we going to be voting on this, or is this just a heads up? Is there going to be any kind of formal action taken by council to change the goals that we had originally established? And then I got another question, if I can.
I'll jump in, Nick, on this one. As we look at our goals, this will inform us as we go into the budget. And as the budget is developed, if you choose to vote on it, it can be presented as an item for voting, but our intent is it would be the framework onto which our budget is developed and how it's shared as we bring the budget forward, we'd be bringing the goals with it and how we're spending the money.
So if I understand you correctly, the budget that's going to be brought forward will have these new goals, will be based on these new goals.
Yes,
So we are abandoning the 2016 goal as far, in all practical senses. That is DOA. Or DO, it's not going to
but
happen.
we're not achieving it. And unless there is considerable more funding put into it, we are struggling to get there. But part of what we are asking the consultant and working on is, what is the dollar differential, the dollar delta, the funding delta needed to increase the goals from what we have presented tonight? And that will be a discussion once we know those that can be shared.
I think that would be a great interest to this body and myself to know what that delta is, to be able to have a higher number set. 6 might be fine in terms of the PACER rating, but the number of streets, the percentage of streets, I can't take back to my constituents and say this is the best that I can do for you. It's just, I think we need to find a better goal to set ourselves on. And there was some talk about dashboarding the information, and much of these projects are based on our 2-year budget cycle, the capital improvements plan. What would we put in that dashboard based on the kind of myopic nature of our projects and when we go to do them? We don't have a 5 and 10-year outlook that is predictable. What would be put into that dashboard, I guess? And I know that staff hasn't had a whole lot of time to think about it. It was just brought up tonight. But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we don't know what we're doing more than 2 years out. I mean, we got a 5-year plan, but go ahead.
Funding wise, we do have funding plans. And I look at Nick, who does the Fund 60 plans. They go out 5-6 years.
Yeah, they mirror the CIP, which goes out 5 years as well.
But they don't necessarily have named roads in it. It talks about the funding level. Some of the larger projects are named in it, but go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say our major roads are named explicitly in the CIP. Our local roads are lumped together under the local road resurfacing program.
And part of the issue is the nature of road deterioration on the bottom end depends a lot on what the recent weather has been, the recent winters. And we shift those around when you start looking further out.
So I guess, thanks for that. And we hear the attention and the emails are about our local roads mostly. How can we focus more, if we are to provide that transparency and information to the constituents on when they can expect reprieve or repair to their neighborhood streets?
We have in recent years, we've started identifying the regions that we're going to be working in with our local street resurfacing program every year. Previously, we didn't really plan out more than 1 year in advance for that. And the way we're operating our local street resurfacing program these days is that we pick an area, a neighborhood, and we focus on that area for that year. And there's some advantages to doing that, limited amount of disruption for the neighborhood, and maybe getting some better prices from the contractor if they don't have to bounce around all over the city. So we started laying out those areas for coming years. So we have tentative plans right now for 22, 23, 24. So there is some information that's being sent out. It won't be a list of street names necessarily, but if we were to put that information on a dashboard, it would show a region within that. And pretty much when we identify, excuse me, when we identify those regions, we can address all of the worst streets in that area, at least, getting all of the 1s and 2s, for example, in that area, for the most part. So that's the information that we would have available that we could put on a dashboard.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Briggs.
Sorry, that triggered for me a question. So if I remember correctly from the Transportation Commission presentation from last year, Ward 5 is up for the next couple of years in terms of being the focus area. I'm hoping I'm remembering that correctly. But do you anticipate that sort of that area of focus shifting at all based on sort of this tweaking to how we're approaching streets in the next construction cycles moving forward?
It could. I don't think we would change the approach. It's possible that, now that we have a fresh set of data, I mean, we laid out our areas for the next few years based on the 2019 paver data the PACER data that we collected. With new data that could shift potentially where we go in coming years. It's not going to change next year, but it might change 23 or 24, for example, don't know yet. But the strategy, I think, works pretty well from an operational standpoint to focus on, moving around different areas of the city each year.
Further discussion, further questions? For my part, what I hear is that the 2026 goals that were presented back in 2016 that we've then, have been operating, as our lodestar and set of expectations were never realistic from the jump, and that they were not going to happen, and that it wasn't, a change of. It's not a question of change of direction or stopping resolve, because I hear staff saying that the direction that we are going in terms of asset management continues to be the right way. But that it was our understanding of the software and the ratings that our roads, the condition that our roads are in from the beginning. And that what we did back then was that we had set a target that was, and that we've been contemplating a target that was never reasonable in light of where we were. And what we were doing along the way to address that problem, to address that condition, and that's disappointing. Of course, it's disappointing because we do know that the provision of roads is one of the things that we do in the city. We have lots of obligations up and down the line, lots of services, lots of quality of life improvements, but the roads are something that is a challenge, and that we were told that we would be able to make progress, and it looks like that was off key from the beginning, and that's like I said, that's regrettable, and that's a disappointment. I'm eager to hear more going forward about the conditions of what the experts in the industry believe to be peer cities. In terms of size, and I'd be size of transportation network, and I'd be interested too in terms of transportation usage profiles, and weather profiles, because I suspect those are highly relevant in terms of the condition of the roads that are present. And I am interested too in the set of information deployment that we are able to provide to our residents. We do have a lot of information about the nature of the roads of growing sophistication, and it's important that we communicate that we communicate to folks the expectations of where their area of the community lies, and it's in our current plans to address this aspect of basic service. And of course, interested further in the sort of analysis that Mr. Honey has identified and how we can do what we do better, because that's something that we over the course of the years have taken a pride in a number of different areas, and it's important that that we do so in this context as well. Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, probably, and this will be the last I speak. I know I've spoken a couple times. When we look at our goals, I mean, goals are goals, and we don't always reach them. And I'm not a big fan of changing the goals just because we're not. But if it reprioritizing somehow, I think we should meet in the middle on this. I think we should still set ourselves goals that are reasonable and that are in keeping with the expectations of our constituents and our taxes. And when we talk about goals, setting goals for streets in the poor category, we're sitting at 1/5 and 2/5 of our 1/5 of our major roads are poor currently, and 2/5 are, if I'm reading that right, our local roads are poor. I mean, that goal should be much lower than that. I mean, the goal should be 0 would be poor, or split the difference between fix the bad ones first and continue our operations, because 1/5 and 2/5 of our roads being poor is just really, that's not a great goal. I mean, I don't, our goal should be maybe hardly any, I'd say, I'll put it out there, hardly any should be poor, in my opinion. And I'd love to shuffle our spending around a little bit to get to that point in a reasonable amount of time. And 2026 is not that far off, 4 years. I know that's a big ask, but I think we should have, a city of Ann Arbor should have very few roads in poor condition. Very few. It's disappointing that they are.
Further discussion? Mr. Hupy, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. McNamara, and of course, Mr. Mahoney, thank you. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, please enter the number on your screen. That is 877-853-5247. 877-853-5247. Once you're connected, please enter meeting ID 942-1273-2148. 942-1273-2148. Once you're connected further, please enter *9, *9 to indicate that you wish to speak. Our clerk will identify you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number when it is your turn to speak. When it is your turn to speak, you'll have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public comment? Is Ms. Beaudry on the line?
I think we lost the clerk, Mayor.
Ms. Beaudry, we did do the call for public comment if you're able to.
Oh, thank you,
facilitate.
Councilmember.
Sorry, I was I lost internet connectivity.
Yeah,
I
we
just
saw
got
you
back.
just came back in, so.
I apologize. Are we ready for public comment?
Yes.
We are. Never worry about a thing. And thank you, Councilmember Hayner, for noting that there was that disconnect. Yes, Ms. Beaudry, we are ready to roll for public comment. It has been read in its entirety. You can call those who are raising their hands, if you please.
Caller with the phone number ending in 534. Do you have a comment?
Good evening. This is Tom Stallberg, and I'm calling from Lower Town in Ann Arbor. and I'd like to speak on something that's going to come up tomorrow. This is a webinar on TC1, a transit corridor zoning webinar, but a mass rezoning of, I believe, 69 properties. For those who know me, I've spoken a lot at council and written a lot about planning and zoning issues, developed subdivisions in multiple other communities, done multiple rezonings in those communities, presented before planning commissions, city councils, township boards. One of the things I haven't done, we always developed our own subdivisions when we did rezonings, but one of the things that you can do and is done is where people rezone a property and then sell it. So the simple act of rezoning it increases the value of that property, increases the wealth of the property owner, and can be just turned into an asset that appreciates and is sold without developing it at all. So I want us to think about this mass rezoning of TC1 is a city-initiated wealth generation for 69 parcels. Obviously, we'd like to see them developed. And I spoke on transit-oriented development in favor of it for a long time. For a lot of years, I've been a proponent of it. I'm disappointed in the current process that we didn't update the comprehensive plan prior to going into the TC1 zoning. I was disappointed that it was voted down 7-4 to look into directly tying into the TC1 zoning community benefits done as some kind of bonus or premium or option. And we've got those in 3 different places in our zoning ordinance and could have baked it in here, but we didn't. That got voted down 7-4. So we're not asking developers to contribute to affordable housing or sustainability measures or more mixed use or enhanced stormwater management, all things that we really need. But what we are doing is creating wealth for 69 parcel owners immediately when we rezone those parcels. And we are the initiator of this. So there's been a list produced to the property owners from the tax rolls, and it shows a lot of LLCs, for example. And you can go onto the state site, Laura, and look up an LLC ownership, but sometimes you don't always find out who owns it. You might get an agent or an attorney. So what I'd like the city to do, and I asked Brett Leonard to do this last Tuesday, but he declined to offer any more information than what we already know, is I would like the city, who is the initiator of this wealth generation for these parcels, to tell
30
us
seconds.
who are the people behind those LLCs, those agents, those attorneys, whoever's registered. We, the citizens, want to know whose wealth you are increasing if you vote for this 69 parcel mass rezoning. I think we're entitled to know who is going to benefit, not when they're developed and they're made more valuable with a new building, but simply by rezoning it, you're going to increase their wealth, and we'd like to know who that is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 604. Press *6 to unmute your phone. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is Eric Lipson over on Rosewood Street. And I'm just going to comment on a few things on infrastructure. Thank you for the opportunity. First, I want to say thank you to the mostly men who come through here about once a week patching the roads. These are the guys who are actually keeping the roads in any kind of safe or passable condition, at least Rosewood, and I assume there's other neighborhoods in a similar situation. So thanks to those people who are actually keeping your asses from getting sued all the time, because they are repairing these streets, which really, of course, we all know need it. Secondly, I'd like to say that one of the things that I have seen is optimistic is there has been a very, very large increase in sidewalk construction and repair, and that's very optimistic. And of course, those sidewalks can also be used for electric bikes and scooters, although we know there's a conflict there sometimes. But this infrastructure lasts longer, is a lot less expensive to install, and will encourage the use of alternatives to the automobile when that network is more comprehensive. And you are working in that direction. Finally, Stimson between State and South Industrial that was just, the sidewalk gap was filled. I know on Jackson Road, there was some really extensive sidewalk work on Packard between Eisenhower and Platt. Excellent new works, new sidewalk on Eisenhower between State and Main Street. There's new sidewalk. So there's areas where you can see progress, and it does, in fact, I was just reading today, the impact of bikes and scooters is going to be significant in the future on energy conservation and all those goals that we all hold dear as far as reducing our carbon footprint, and it's not to be underestimated. So so your investment in that infrastructure is important. Just one other thing, there's been this controversy, of course, about the healthy streets, and Rosewood was designated as a healthy street. And when you have less traffic, because Rosewood is a street where it turns into a commercial district after at a certain point.
30 seconds.
By discouraging the commercial traffic from going down Rosewood or similar streets, you're therefore improving the lifetime of the street itself. So there are other benefits besides quality of life to the healthy streets, including improving the lifetime of the roadway if you channel that traffic down more appropriate roads like South Industrial, for example. So thanks again. Good work on those things, and good luck on the roads. We all know that there's just so many of them, but if you can make more non-motorized progress, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 644. Caller 644, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Kathy Boris. I live at 1726 Charlton in Ward 5. Before we leave the Halloween season, please listen to one more scary story. The following is a scary story about TC1, a city planning commission initiative which will rezone 69 properties in the state Eisenhower corridor. This rezoning will benefit the owners of those 69 properties by substantially increasing the value of their properties, literally overnight. Maybe that sounds good, like growth in apple pie, but there is something disturbing about our planning commission and our city council passing an initiative with such high stakes financial benefits, and the public's not being able to determine exactly who owns those 69 parcels. At the November 4th Planning Commission meeting, Brett Leonard showed a list that is posted on the TC1 Initiative webpage, as though that list of LLCs and financial institutions was all that was necessary for public transparency. On that list, the names of the actual owners do not appear. So suppose that you, as a member of the public, wanted to compare the names on the mayor's campaign donor list that he must file with the county with the 69 names on the TC1 initiative list. You would not be able to do so. Conveniently for the mayor, you could not compare his campaign donors with the beneficiaries of TC1. I suggest that this is a scary situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 345. Do you have a comment? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Kitty Kahn calling from the 5th Ward. I would like to welcome Mr. Dahoney, and I was so happy to hear you say that you will be looking at our spending priorities, and I just want to thank you very much. Welcome. Bye.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Mayor, I don't see any other callers on the line.
Thank you. Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there further communications today from council? Councilman Griswold, you're knocking up into your 2 hours here. It's a self-inflicted wound.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just curious if we had another topic, or if maybe when we only have one topic, it's a 1 hour session. So anyway, I just want to mention for the public that MLive had an article today about dioxin being detected outside the plume boundaries in Scioto Township in areas where we didn't expect it. And one question I have for staff, and it doesn't need to be answered tonight, is do we need a resolution to take any action, or is there action in place right now that's going to happen? And three actions are: the county has been asked to install a monitoring well in West Park in the parking lot near Chapin, and that is part of the ongoing project with dioxin tainted water potentially going into the storm sewer drain in that area. Number two, we had a plan for sentinel monitoring wells to be installed by the city of Ann Arbor between the Plume and the Huron River, and I'm wondering what the status is of those wells. And number three, I just want to mention that the Congresswoman did communicate with the EPA and is on top of this situation. So we have some things to be thankful for. Thank you.
Councilmember Dish.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments in response to some of the things that we heard about TC1. And the first thing I wanted to remind everybody of is that the TC1 zoning has support from 4 of the documents that comprise our comprehensive planning library. I won't say document because it's many. And those 4 that have called for, residents have called for in public participation, TC1 zoning are the land use element 2009, the sustainability framework from 2013, the South State Corridor Plan from 2013, and the comprehensive transportation plan from 2021. So in terms of the beneficiaries of the plan, the public is a big beneficiary of the plan. In terms of the concerns about transparency with respect to who owns the properties, Mr. Leonard not only showed the document that lists the LLCs, he explained that it is very difficult you have to do a research project essentially to find the owners of properties, the actual names of owners. And he made a couple of suggestions as to how interested people might be able to do that, but he indicated that he did not have time to do that before tomorrow night. So the city is being as transparent about this as it ever is. And it is not, it is simply not normal to have the names of an actual person on such a document. And I'm sure that we would all welcome anyone who wants to unearth that information. They can go ahead and do that.
Councilmember Briggs.
I just wanted to echo sort of the accolades that Mr. Lipson, when he called in as a constituent, as a resident, just say it from the council perspective, we've made a lot of progress in sidewalk gaps, and it is so exciting to see particularly the sidewalk gap on Jackson being filled. That was such a critical one and really dangerous. So I'm excited to use it. I've only driven by it so far, so it's a little ways from my house, but I'm very excited to be for the nearby residents, and thanks to staff for all that work.
Further communication from council. Motion to adjourn, please. Move by Councilor Briggs. Dish, second by Councilor Nelson. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Ms. Beaudry, thank you. Mr. Mahoney, thank you. Bye now.